in your next life, you find this video. And so this video is old by now. It's probably several hundred years old. Maybe it's 100 years old or 50 years old or 30 years old or 200 years old. But if this video shows up and it's very old and ancient video from many lifetimes back and you're watching it, this is the information you need to know about a war in a time of peace that's happening between men and women, and the divine masculine and divine feminine are at war still as we speak. Unless, of course, if this is the future, 20, 30, 50 years ahead, it has since stopped. And however, this being the year 2023 AD, it has gone on since BC times and into as far as 1100 BC. It has not stopped since then. In fact, the Trojan conflict is where it started and began, and it has still been going on to this day in 2023, January. It's still just as in right now, we are having a war between men and women, the divine masculine wars with the divine feminine, and the divine feminine is at utter war with the divine masculine. And we have gotten used to it to such a degree that we don't call it war anymore. We call it arguing once in a while now. It's been 3,000 years. It turned from utter war to 3,000 years later, called the way our life is. We don't get along so good. We have lots of differences. We argue all the time. And we divorce and we get married and fight and we kill each other. And ultimately it's called battle. So in times of peace, it's a time of war. And today, if you're watching this video, and this video is old and from long ago, if it still lasts, if it's still here, I want you to tell you what you need to know so that you don't ruin your life the way that many here now have already ruined their lives. We think that a time of peace is not a time of war, and we are wrong, because a time of peace is a time of war and the time of war. And at peace and peace times, we are in pieces, and those pieces are broken and separated and disconnected from each other. It's the peace we have, which isn't the peace that is theirs, and it's the peace that we share, is that they can share their peace with themselves and not with us, and we won't share our peace either with them, which means that peace is a broken, disconnected relationship with the feminine and the masculine. And 3,000 years into this struggle and conflict, we have learned how to actually be at peace with our conflict and even see it as just the way life is. It's kind of in conflict. It's not at least in agreement. And so our war has turned from bloody Troy to murderous goddesses and gods, and husband killing wife, beating her to death, to poisoning husband, to murderous, to all the way now where it's much less pronounced and just as going on. And so now it's just argumentative and disposition, not really for them in support, maybe acting like it. So it just turns, it's like a war that went slowly into, it didn't seem to be fighting anymore, but it certainly is, and certainly still is. So if it's already been solved and you're watching this and it's 300 years in the future, then I would say that perhaps you've already resolved it. And I'd say since it's been happening for 3,000 years already and it hasn't been resolved whatsoever, I could tell you it's whatsoever that it has not been resolved. In fact, the fact we think we're not fighting or that we're even getting along with each other is also why we justified divorce, disagreements. And we even say now we agree to disagree and it's okay. It certainly is not okay. So if we weren't in conflict, we would not tell each other that it's okay to disagree. We can agree to disagree. Certainly that is the most pathetic statement that I have ever heard, that we can agree to disagree. No, we could agree to fight, and we could agree to kill each other. And so we could agree to disagree, and it could work. So it's just ridiculous to think that we are not given the information in school nor taught any of what we need to know. So what destroys us as a human race and as a people, and what will destroy us, just as it did, Rome fell, Troy fell, the War of the Roses, the 100-Year War in England. We're talking about every conflict that ever happened, including probably something related to World War I, World War II, and hopefully not World War III. And it's always because of people are not taught anything about what they need to know. They're also not even aware of what's really happening. The fact that in peace times, we are having war times, and it's just our peace. It's not their peace, and we don't have nothing to do with their peace, and we don't want any peace with their peace. We'll have peace with our peace. It's called war when it's called peace, and just mine, but not yours. So the first thing you need to know about is that there are rules to existence, and this includes genetics. This includes your genetics, and that this means that if you are going to exist healthily and not die from sickness or even some illness or be stricken with perhaps ailments of every kind or any kind of severity, if you're not stricken with health issues constantly or having ailments or even, getting sick from diseases, well, these are all causes that have causes, and the effects are the suffering that we will all suffer. And because we're at war and we have not resolved it for the last 300 years, and it's just as not resolved today as we have modernized our warfare between men and women into a agree to disagree. And so we'll argue sometimes, more like all the time, or maybe we won't really argue because we don't have nothing to do with each other anyways. The problem is that it'll be a conflict that's allowed to exist, expected to exist, and even thought to be normal to exist, because it is a warfare that is also existing and not thought to be anything but actually peace and peace times. And it's not true. It's warfare. And it's still war times. It's just civilized warfare brought to be more civilized over 3,000 years, refined, and so we can live with it. It's a warfare, we can live with it today. And ultimately back then it was much worse. So the genetics that you are, your genes have a behavior modification to your behavior and how your genes act. So genes behave in certain ways. This means that all things that happen to your body, including any sickness or disease, any kind of ailment or illness, will be what I'm talking about now. And it is hugely affected by our genetics. And each person's genetics is different. Now, genes in the body, your genes, your chromosomes, there are two kinds of chromosomes. There are the mitochondrial chromosomes, and there are the nuclear chromosomes that come from men. Mitochondrial chromosomes that come from women that men can have, but women will pass on both nuclear paired autosome chromosomes and ultimately don't pass on the singular version of what's in the testicles, which are unpaired, or in the ovaries of a woman, which are unpaired. So this is the actual techniques on why you need to know about how you're going to avoid an illness or sickness from knowing this information. First of all, genetics has everything to do with everything, which means that the way that your body behaves, and that means how it responds to both viral or bacterial invasion. So you will be likely invaded by two types of bacteria, and ultimately of many different kinds, thousands of different kinds of strains of bacteria, which are all possible killers or making you sick. And then there are also what's called viruses, which are different and act differently from bacteria. And they are also attackers and infiltrators. So bacteria and viruses will infiltrate and attack you by trying to enter into your body, into the bloodstream. If they can get in, viruses will reproduce and replicate themselves. And ultimately bacteria will take over and multiply and eat up everything it can, and ultimately take over basically by numbers. So bacteria will ultimately take you over by numbers, and infections are common, causing your body to literally be invaded by enough invaders that it becomes overwhelmed. It's an infection, they call it. Bacteria could kill you or just make you sick, and ultimately it can make you suffer. And the bacteria that tries to attack you is programmed to attack you, and it has been since it was programmed to do it. So viruses are also programmed to try and enter into us and get into us. It also may be that we have viruses that are dormant, and we do think we don't have viruses, and so we think they get into us when we get sick. And in fact, viruses are sometimes in our body laying in a dormant stage, and sometimes for years. And so when you get a virus, it doesn't mean you didn't have it for years before. It just became active and marched to whatever symptoms that occur that you think you just got it. You may have had it for a long time, or you may have just got it. The bacteria is just literally kept out by the skin barrier. Okay, now your body behaves in a couple different ways in dealing with it. And one of the, first of all, now we're going to do is go back to before birth, during birth, and after birth. So there are 3 periods I want to mention here to help you understand. The first period is before conception. That's before the mitochondrial strand in the ovaries gets with the nuclear strand in the testicles. When they get together, it's from sex, and then they'll do what's called a helix wrap and become one. So the 2 strands, one from the woman's ovaries and one from the man's testicles, come together, and they do what's called a helix wrap. They become one. It's like 2 strands of spaghetti that become 1 strand of spaghetti, but it's made from 2. It becomes one, and it's called conception. So at the point where the 2 strands meet and they actually do the what they call a coupling. It's called a coupling. When they actually become one of 2, of 1 now, it's called a successful coupling. Now, if a coupling is achieved, it means the 2 strands did the twirly whirl and are one now, and that's called conception. And now what happens is what's called protein synthesis and DNA sequencing through a cooperation of sharing information, each one having the exact instructions to how to make a baby or the fetus through protein synthesis, creation of flesh and bone and blood. And like when a fetus is being created, it's over a short period of time. And the 2 strands, they start what's called line for line DNA sequencing after coupling. So first they do a coupling, that's called conception itself. And then they begin fetal development through protein synthesis. And that is the actual fetus starting to come into flesh and bone. So at that moment, it's called what they do, line for line DNA sequencing, and they only have half the instructions for the fetus. This is because God, or whoever God is, whoever programmed our genetics and made our genes the way they are, actually only gave half the instructions to each chromosome. The chromosome in a man's testicles has on its nuclear tip as a chromosome stored information, which actually has the information for creating half of a fetus exactly, but not the other half. So it can't create both halves. It can create half a baby, but it'll be missing the other half. And the woman in the ovary has her mitochondrial strand, and it has got the other half of these instructions. So they each got it. Somebody put, wow, half and half. They literally don't have, neither one of them could make the baby by themselves. They have to share, couple, and then do the sequencing by sharing information. And it's line for line. It's called DNA sequencing. When the fetus is starting to actually, you start to see it become a baby. It's making the brain, the bone. How's that happening? It's got a toe now. It's got a finger. It's got hands. What's going on? How's it doing that? It's doing protein synthesis through DNA sequencing, and it's called protein synthesis. What that means is it's fetal development. Now, because of the cooperation of the sharing of the DNA, the sharing of the 2 strands, sharing the information when they only got half, understand that the health of the baby will be exact if it gets to be that they do share information. If they don't, it's going to be either a miscarriage, because literally it won't create. If they don't share, it'll be one side creating half the baby. If you have a fetus that's only halfway there, it's a miscarriage. It'll be rejected from the womb. So unless it's healthy, it won't be. And ultimately, if they share the information correctly, it will be. This is why I'm speaking about this coupling and this coupling. So remember, coupling is the first thing required for life. You can't live. You certainly can't come into this world unless you couple. What that means is by getting with the other strand, you have to become one. It's literally the fact that if you try to think you can come in this world, God said, no, you may not unless you couple and become one first. That means you become one with the other strand, and you better be one, or you will not be 2. You cannot be 2. You'll be 1. It's ultimately made it 2. So God did that. So understand, whoever programmed our genetics so that they do what they do, made it so if these two strands don't actually couple and become one, they may not go into protein synthesis. There's no DNA sequencing that can start, which means the fetus cannot be developed. The baby cannot even, it's not a pregnancy. This is just a coupling, but it's now able to be a pregnancy because it does the DNA sequencing, which becomes the pregnancy and develops the fetus. And there's the second line. So understand that because they each have half the instructions for creating that baby, and they got to get together now as one and do the sharing each one. They each share their half together, line for line, and it makes a healthy baby because they did not share. Understand that if you would think that two strands of DNA are not going to be sharing information for some reason, isn't that kind of weird that you think that, well, I mean, is it even possible that one strand has some kind of intelligence to say, like, I don't feel like sharing with you? Yes, it is. Understand that the behavior of genetics is on a level that is not even explainable. And certainly geneticists don't really have most of the answers of how genetics really work, because we, first of all, don't know a lot about why genetic disorders happen. And I'll tell you that what you'll read in a genetics book about what they have, why we have genetic disorders and diseases, well, they say because it happens and it's just a part of life. Well, that's not the true answer. The answer is because each chromosome that becomes stored information, every genetic disease that is in, okay, so I'm going to skip to the coupling. So I don't need to go into detail too much, I'm being told. So don't worry about the detail. Maybe later I'm told to talk about the coupling, which is an effect must be done or you can't have life. So what God said is, it's what he did when he created our genetics. He said, I don't say anything to you. I'm not going to say anything to you. So you won't hear me say this. But if you could hear me say, when I created your genetics, how your genes work, how you get pregnant, how everything works. He said that I made it clear to any geneticist that can see this, and if they want to share this information, that's part of the whole plan. Understand that sharing information is the second thing required to avoid genetic diseases of all kinds. And there's thousands of them of different severity. So understand that what I'm claiming is that coupling won't cause genetic disorders. It'll cause, you can't even be pregnant if you can't conceive. So conception is not allowed until the coupling is achieved. That's what God did, because God said, if you don't get with each other, I don't care if you like each other. I don't care if you hate each other, and you could like each other or hate each other. But if you don't get together and actually become one, you certainly won't exist, either one of you. You'll both die, and you won't come into this world if you don't get together and become one. And once you do become one, I'll expect you to share information now, and I'll give you half each about how to do the fetus, which means that if you don't want to share information, Mr. Strands of nuclear DNA and mitochondrial, then you're going to punish your baby. So what happens when they don't share information? They punish the baby. In fact, it's God's punishment. So if you translate these genetics the way I do, I'm telling you that this is all true. In fact, that the way it was set up was that they must share information, and only having half, they have to share all of it and with each other to make the whole baby whole healthy. If they don't share any part of it, any part they don't share is going to trigger what's called a genetic disorder or of any kind, any severity. And there's thousands of them listed in our chromosomes. And chromosomes we have in our body that only have genetic diseases in them, but they're instructions for how to create the genetic disease. So how do you get a genetic disease? You actually, well, you can't get a genetic disease. It's impossible, because actually you'd have to have a way to make the disease, to instruct it to be a disease. So how does the genetic disorder start? Through what's called bio instructions, following a bio-instruction programming that is actually the genetic disorders. There's a library of how to do it. So what does it mean? The daughter cells in the body, your daughter cells, which are genes, also along in cooperation with what are called mitochondria, and mitochondrial is different from mitochondria. And I won't even explain what a mitochondria is, but it's an organism, an entity that is responsible for killing you or bringing you back to life, or healing you or killing you again. And ultimately it'll make you age and die slowly, as it also heals you and keeps you alive, and helps your cells grow and heal too. So the mitochondria are both killing us off slowly, and ultimately also burning fat and doing other things. Really important. The point is that in the genetics, I don't want to explain it too much. I'll try not to get too in detail, and I love to get in detail because I actually know all the details, and it's amazing. So I'm going to try not to get in too much detail here and be more brief and cover the field. You are not allowed to not couple with her if you're him, and you're not allowed to pretend to couple with him, and it's not really real, and you don't care because you're going to it's not real. You're not allowed to be disingenuine or not genuine. You're not allowed to be not genuine. If you're not genuine, then the coupling is a false coupling, and because of that, it'll cause the sharing to not happen. The sharing of information, the false coupling, it's just two strands that don't really want to get together, or maybe they thought they had to exist, and they did. These two strands of DNA would die. They would die, and they'd be dead. They could not live, which means that the sperm in a man's testicles wants to live. It's trying to get to that egg, and when that egg is the mitochondrial strand, it wants to live too, but ultimately it doesn't want to get invaded by a sperm, and then so it's not kind of reluctant. Yeah, the mitochondrial strands in the ovaries will be reluctant to accept the sperm when it tries to couple, because the sperm is ordered just to jump on her and couple with her without permission. And she'll be like, whoa, that strand will definitely, some of the times when you don't get pregnant, it's because I'll tell you, the behavior of the genetics is, well, if you knew, you wouldn't believe it. You'd say, how can a strand of DNA decide not to share information or even refuse to couple? Well, they can. And I want you to not only know that a strand of DNA could refuse to couple, but it will not be allowed to exist or live at all, period, if it does. And if it actually refuses to share information, it will be allowed to exist and come into life. So it won't be denied life if it doesn't share. It'll be denied life if it doesn't couple, though. And so if it doesn't share, it'll only be that the baby gets punished. So neither one of the strands will get punished, but they'll become the baby. They're going to become the baby. Ultimately, they're also not the baby, which means that when they decide not to share, they end up punishing the baby, which is themselves. If they ultimately reason that the baby's not them because it's not created yet, when the two strands become the baby, they are the baby, and then they will have punished themselves, thinking that maybe it was only the baby that got punished, but they are the baby. You understand? So that they will find out that the punishment was not just for the baby, but they're being punished too. And what this means is sharing information is crucial to not being punished with disease. And every genetic disorder will come from a trigger when they don't share information. If they trigger off a genetic disorder, it's because when one doesn't share in the line for line DNA sequencing, when one decides not to share with the other, it stops the creation of the fetus for a time. Understand, when the fetus is being developed, it's crucial that it keeps going until it's finished. And it's only a certain period of time the fetus is developed. And once it starts, you can't certainly stop it in the middle of development. That would be an emergency, man. You're like, oh my God, like when this process starts, the protein synthesis, it must go all the way to the finish, and it can't stop. If it stops because one won't share, it does stop. At that point, there's a trigger released for why did this stop? Why has it stopped? This fetus just stopped developing suddenly. That means one of them's not sharing for whatever reason. And it'll be trigger. Now, based upon whatever reason it is, I don't know, but it'll trigger up to 1,000 different, depending on which chromosome it accesses for the genetic disorders, it will create a genetic disorder. So instead of following the instructions for creating the fetus itself, which it's supposed to do, if the instructions stop, it can't continue to do it. It won't be able to follow orders. It'll either become an abortion or a miscarriage and stop completely, and that means the baby dies, or it'll trigger a genetic disorder as a punishment, and it will start to now set instructions in place where it should have been creating the fetus itself. It'll set instructions in place that give it orders to create the genetic disorder, meaning the disease, the genetic disorder comes from genetic disorders are they're not the same as diseases that are not genetic. So genetic illness or genetic disorders are specific to only being created during the time of the fetal creation, when you're after conception. So while a baby's being created, that's when all the genetic disorders hit you. And understand that if you want to disagree with that, then you would say, when I was 50, why did I get a genetic disorder? Well, because you had it when you got it, when I told you got it. That was when you were a baby, like not even being created yet. You got it at the time of conception, at that moment when they wouldn't share, but you've had it your whole life. And so when you're 50 years old, you've got a genetic disorder just popped up, and now you've got this genetic disorder. Suddenly, oh my God, I'm 50 and I have this genetic disorder. What happened? Well, you've had it since you were a baby, and it was dormant, and it just came out. And so we have lots of genetic disorders that could be dormant and not being carried out. It's an instruction that doesn't carry itself out. It's like, I have a genetic sickness and disorder that's severe, and it's dormant, and it's not obeying. It's not doing anything. It's sitting in me, and like it's not there, but it is there. If it starts at any time to become active or alive, I would suddenly get symptoms and have to go to the doctor. And so understand that the genetic disorders within us, we have many of them that are dormant and not doing anything. And so understand there's a behavior that's causing them to suddenly come out, and it does. So I'm suggesting it has to do with sharing information or cooperating between the masculine and divine feminine. They must cooperate. And they have to not only cooperate, it needs to be genuine cooperation, or at least trying. If it's just a relationship based on, like I'm not really coupled with you, or we're only cooperating, pretending like I don't really like you or care about you, well, understand that is disease. That mentality of, I don't really care about you, man, but I'll pretend to be your friend and ultimately backstab you or whatever. That's called, okay, well, you might not get sick that way. Certainly it's possible easily that if a person's completely not sharing any information, withholding information, that means they don't share spiritually. They don't open up to other people. They shut down, withhold. It's a spiritual behavior that causes disease, and it will make a person sick after a long time. Now, you could argue with me, because there'll be some people that do it big time and don't get sick at all. In fact, they're healthy as fine. Well, I'll tell you that there's explanations for that too, because there's a lot more to genetics than just coupling and sharing information or not. There's also disposition as to whether you want to get along or whether you actually want to war. And if a person wants to war, it could be that warring could be good, and it could ultimately protect you. So the state of warfare, or attacking someone or being aggressive, it certainly could save you if in the instance you need to use it. So anger could be very helpful, and madness could even be very beneficial. And when you need to get instant strength and authority and pull yourself together, you need to get pissed off and ready to fight. Well, ultimately, yeah. So there's reasons we could say there's reasons why when we do the wrong thing, it's actually what we need to do. Like when we're at war, we need to get psyched up and psych ourselves. Yeah, when we're at war, we need to do something that we shouldn't be doing, but we're doing it because we're at war, so we have to do it. And ultimately, it could be empowering and actually empower us. So what makes us sick could actually empower us. At the same time, it could also make us sick later, or even at the time, or not. And the genetics will have an absolute pattern, which will make sense. Even if I can't explain it all to you, I'll tell you that the genes behave based on an exact kind of attitude, characteristic, and behavior of the human being, and directing towards whoever they're fighting or not fighting. It may be just as bad not to fight as it is to fight. And so maybe you have to fight. And ultimately, maybe when you know when to quit fighting, that's crucial to know when to quit fighting, because maybe you should keep fighting if you shouldn't quit fighting. And if you should quit fighting and you keep fighting, maybe then you don't know when to quit fighting. So then you can't quit, or you won't quit, or you think, So ultimately, what do you do if you don't know? You have to know that you're not supposed to be fighting. So if you're fighting the divine, if a man is fighting a woman emotionally or spiritually against her in disposition, it's called, what that means is he's set spiritually against her. His spirit is set against her in an emotional, spiritual position. It's called disposition. It's a spiritual disposition, and it could be a killer, either to her or to itself, and maybe both. But certainly possibly neither as well, which means that when genetics start to behave on the level I'm talking about, there's no way to predict it, and even really no way to explain it all, because I'll get as close as I can to explain in detail to you about the important parts to know. And it'll be that you can't not get with her if you're him, or you cannot get with him if you're her. You have to get with him, and you have to be cooperating and coupling, becoming one. That's how you please God. That's how you'll be allowed to live. And then you share information, and that's how you'll be allowed to make life easy on you, both of you. And ultimately, the biggest problem that started in Troy, and conflicts were that women were withholding information from men, and they wouldn't tell them anything. And so this caused men to distrust women and their wives. And they ultimately said, after a while, that my wife's a witch. She doesn't even, yeah, it's based on she didn't share any information with me at one time. And the next 6 months later, she was a witch. And I was beating her like a dog, because ultimately the men, if their wives won't share information with them, I promise you, if you did a study on this and watched 6 months over a relationship between a man and a woman, if she wasn't sharing anything with them on purpose, she was told, like, don't tell him much, but if you do tell him, you have to talk about this or that. And ultimately she was very selective about what she shared. He would not only become suspicious of his wife, but he would grow to hate her. And he would also call her a bad witch and even want to kill her, perhaps. Certainly he'll be temperamentally wanting to beat her like a dog. He would end up getting very angry at her and mad. And in madness, he would attack her eventually, or get away from her just by abandoning her or leaving her. She could be just fine if she's withholding information, and she wouldn't have a problem. It would be him having a problem, you see. So when a woman withholds information from a man, it causes him to be disturbed. And unfortunately, because she won't be disturbed, she's feeling just fine, not telling him a thing. And ultimately that will make him mad, even though he doesn't understand it. He'll certainly get a feeling of something I understand and something's wrong with her. And I'll pick anything out now because I'm never going to know. The man gets mad. And the man not sharing information with the woman, well, it's not the same thing. But ultimately, if a man won't share information with a woman, she's very much going to be suspicious against him. And she's going to definitely not believe him. And she's going to question where he is and maybe think he's lying. And maybe he's cheating on her. And it'll be because he doesn't share information with her or tell her where he's going. If a man won't tell a woman where he's going, well, she'll ask where he went. And whatever he tells her, if he hesitates even too long, she'll count that as he's lying or he's hiding something. She won't know. A man hesitating to tell his wife the truth for too long, which means maybe over a 10-second period, he hesitates when she says, where were you? And he says, he's thinking, like, I don't know if I could tell her, and he takes 10 seconds to think he didn't tell her anything yet. Too late. At that moment, 10 seconds, he's still thinking, like, I wonder what I'm going to tell her. He's paused too long. And she says, okay, that's it. Her feeling says he is not going to tell me, he's lying. So he says, oh, I was at the grocery store. And she said, her feelings have already decided, no, I don't care what you say. You weren't at no grocery store. You're lying. You're a liar, buddy. So because I paused for 10 seconds to try to wonder how I might lie to you, you call me a liar? What if I tell you the truth? Well, I'd still think you're a liar, because the fact you paused too long, it caused me to think you're lying. And I'll even make up a lie and blame it on you. So she'll actually blame him for cheating when he didn't. She'll tell him he's lying when he's not. He probably is lying, and she's not wrong a lot too, which means that the behavior of men and women, how they behave with each other, is so at peacetime inappropriate, like the husband not telling his wife where he actually went, pausing too long, and actually that means he hesitated too long, and that's a sign of he's not telling her, and she'll get that, which means that even if he does tell her the truth, if he pauses too long, she'll count it as it's not true. She'll feel it's not true, even though it is. She'll actually demand it is absolutely a big lie, and she'll stomp her feet. Don't tell me you didn't pause for 10 seconds, but she won't know that. You see, she'll actually think he's a liar because he paused for 10 seconds and have no idea that she'll even say, don't tell me I'm wrong. I guarantee you, she won't know how to understand that you paused for 10 seconds and then told me the truth. Okay, but I did tell you the truth. Yeah, but I didn't know you actually paused for 10 seconds, but you paused for 10 seconds. And then I said, that's it. I know you're a liar. And I didn't even know it was because you paused, because then you told me the truth, and that was the lie. I knew it was. And this is called people misinformed, not spiritually aware, and unaware of how simple things like he won't tell her really where he's going, or he pauses too long, causes everything to go wrong. Not sharing information causes everything to go wrong. Even not sharing little information, like specifically not wanting to tell him something when you think like he really wants to know. Well, it's certainly, even though you don't tell him, and he doesn't get to know then, and so he can't say that you're withholding anything because he doesn't even know what you're thinking. You see, you think, well, I don't need to tell him, and he doesn't know anything about it, so it's not going to matter. Oh, yes, it is. And that's a ridiculous thing to say, young lady, because you're going to tell me it doesn't really matter. I'm going to tell you that when you decide not to tell your husband that, he was feeling something was wrong, and he won't ever know, because he's not going to know what you didn't say, but he's going to feel what you didn't say, and you didn't say anything, and he did feel it. So he felt something, and he may interpret his feeling wrong, and he may interpret his feeling right, and he may just utterly do it really wrong. So yeah, that guy's going to react to a feeling that says his wife's doing something wrong. What's his wife doing? Well, she's not telling him something, and she's thinking to herself, he isn't, it's none of his business, and I don't need to tell him. And he's feeling like, whoa, man, honey, something wrong? No, darling, everything's fine. Well, yeah, right. I'm pissed for some reason. Yeah, I don't even like you. Get out of this. What do you want? Ultimately, he'll be mad. He could react in any way, but I want you to know that a woman just deciding that it's okay not to share that with him because like she's thinking about it. He's feeling that. He's going to feel her knowing what she's doing, and it will make him angry, but he won't have any understanding behind the anger, which means that in every situation, it'll be different. With every man, it'll be a kind of different impulsive kind of reaction that could be anywhere from highly aggressively indifferent and even aggressively mad or violent to just my wife's stupid. She doesn't even talk to me. Like basically I'm just irritated because she won't tell me something and I don't even know what it is. Well, you do know what it is. You're pretty smart. You're irritated at your wife just for no reason. Yeah, for no reason. She pisses me off. She just wasn't sharing something with you and she was thinking about it and you were feeling it. And then you're trying to figure out what the hell's going on. And you don't know. And you'll never know. Neither will she. So you two are going to have all kinds of problems because neither one of you has spiritual awareness of a gnat. And that's pretty much how it works. Hang on a second. I'm trying to figure out what I'm supposed to be focused on here. I'm pretty sure. Your genetics in alignment with the divine feminine and divine masculine. So your genetics need to be not in. So as a woman or a man in this world, what you need to realize is that you can't be against men in this world. If you're a woman, you can't be against men. And in fact, if you're against men, you'll be against the divine masculine collective, and those are more than one man. So if you're against one man, you're against all men. So I want you to know that your ex-boyfriend probably ruined everything for you because after what he did to you, now every relationship you have doesn't even work, and it's ultimately his fault. So you could probably pick one boyfriend back there that screwed it all up for you and made all your relationships shitty. And basically all men are the same, and they're doing the same bullshit. And basically, yeah, you're ultimately going to be permanently agitated about it. And maybe you're not too wrong, but understand that what you need to know as a woman is that the divine feminine as a collective is including all women, and the divine feminine as in an individual woman is just one woman, and it's only one small, very small, physimatesimal small. So if there's a million women in the world, that's the collective, and they're all together as one in the feeling. They all feel the same feeling. It's called the divine feminine collective. It's all the women in it. There's different divine feminine collectives because there was different goddesses. So there's different. The divine feminine collective is supposed to be not at war with men, not in disposition or against or fighting or struggling or even judging in any way, which means that what you need to be is on good terms with all the men in your past. This means that your boyfriends from your past that were just dogs and alcoholic, worthless men that might have really abused you or done something wrong to you, I want you to know that you can't actually look at them as bad. But if you do, it'll actually hurt you. It'll hurt you in a big way because actually by judging your one boyfriend back a ways, you're going to succeed in judging the entire divine masculine collective, and that includes all men, or at least a big group of portion of men. There's different divine masculine collectives. I don't know how many there are. There's one big one, and then there's some small ones. They include men that have feminine, or men that have just masculine and not feminine, or men that are just feminine and not masculine, which are a much smaller group. But the collectives are incorporating a mixture of feminine and masculine energies in the spirit. And so what you need to be, if you are using conflict to to empower yourself, well, it does, and it can, and it's ultimately in the long run a disease causer, an ailment causer. So I'm not saying you'll get sick for being in conflict and enjoying it. Certainly, I would say you're on dangerous ground being out of alignment with the divine. If you're divine feminine, I'd say you're in dangerous ground. I would be afraid for you to say that if you're in conflict and you're enjoying it, like somehow, like, yeah, screw that, I love this, yeah, let's get him back, and that mother F. Like, ultimately, well, it could be empowering, and you'll get sick eventually. You'll have symptoms of some ailment probably, and ultimately, yeah, I'm not kidding, and ultimately this is all true. So, and if you don't, it's possible you won't. So, but the body will fight itself genetically when the two masculine collectives fight themselves spiritually. So I'm trying to show you an example of how the actual body behaves as above, so below. One of the most smartest things I've ever known or heard that I love, and I think it came from Hermes or Thoth. Hermes, either, yeah, one of those, Hermes or Thoth, said that as above, so below. I think it was Hermes Trismegistus or something like that. As above, so below. And it's the most true saying there is, because as up on Mount Olympus, the gods live up there. As it is up there, whatever they're doing with each other, we're doing down here. Which means if the Zeus, the god of gods, is arguing with his wife and calling her stupid, well, then there's a man down here calling his wife stupid, or thinking it and maybe not saying it, but he's going to be doing whatever that god does. And the gods up there as above. The gods up there, whatever they're doing with their goddesses, the gods and goddesses lived up on Mount Olympus. So the gods and goddesses actually lived on earth on the mountain, and they were up there doing something. They were having families, they were having outings, whatever you do, but humans were really not allowed to go up there. If they tried to go up there, they would be stopped by guards. And so the gods were up there, and they were having relations, and there was a god and goddess world happening, and the whole world down here, as above, so below, was reflecting every part of the spiritual nature of whatever they were doing up there. So if they were fighting up there, we'd be fighting down here. When they were making love up there, we'd be making love down here. And the humans will be doing whatever the gods and goddesses are doing, and they certainly can't help it. So how I feel is how the God I have feels, or I'll be influenced by his emotions and directly. So this means that if the goddesses and gods are in conflict, they will cause humans to be in conflict. And it's the gods and goddesses' fault that the humans are fighting. So we can blame the gods and goddesses for the humans fighting. We can, in fact, say the gods and goddesses are the only reason the humans fought, because the humans were just doing whatever they were doing emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, and couldn't help it. They were directly influenced, under the influence, and the gods will make you feel, and you will feel whatever they feel and do whatever they're doing. When they're killing each other, you'll be killing each other. And so the war in Troy and the war on earth and the battle between masculine and feminine and between men and women is still a difference. And it has to do everything with there's only one God now. So if there's only one God, men are at peace, because men are at peace if there's only one God. Because God is actually a male and a masculine, it makes men feel peaceful. But women are at less peace. And as a whole, women, the collective, they're not at peace whatsoever, because there's only one God. Now understand that nobody's going to change it. And it's a true fact. I think his name's Jehovah or Yahweh, Jesus. But ultimately, the one God that is, it could be Zeus. It's maybe they're all the same thing, or it's Zeus or maybe Jupiter. I'm giving you different names from different culture times and mythology. It's all the same God. It's the one God, and he's real, and he's absolutely the only one that's there. There's no goddess in this world. And I'm just saying, I want you to know that the divine feminine collective as a whole is very upset at what happened in Troy and why the goddesses disappeared. And they're also traumatized by the war and the conflict that's still going on, but was much worse then. And when the goddesses were all killed, murdered by the one God, who is a God that does that kind of thing, when he is thinking he flooded the earth and killed us all. He's killed us more than once and destroyed whole races. Our God our God is a very fearful God you should fear, and ultimately respect and admire as well, and then follow and worship as well if you'd like. But he's definitely something that is called one God, the only one that's there, and that makes men comfortable because he's masculine, and it makes women uncomfortable because there's no feminine there in charge next to him. So understand when Mount Olympus was, when Hera was here with Zeus, there was a mother goddess that was actually head of all the divine feminine collectives. She was a goddess, a mother of goddesses. She was called Hera. She was a queen of queen, goddess of goddesses. And she was like Zeus, the father of all gods and goddesses. And he was, so we had two, right? So the women felt comfortable then because they had Hera. And I want you to know that the collective of in Troy, the women were very comfortable and very docile, loving, very loving and caring and compassionate towards their husbands. They were just really good women. Understand this is before it went to hell. And when Hera was happy before Troy, the Trojan conflict, she was happy before she started to decide she hates Trojans and ego and wants to kill all the men. She did decide she wanted to kill the bloodline. So Hera wanted to kill the bloodline of the Trojans. That includes babies and everything. She said the Trojan bloodline should die, all of it. And ultimately, it's not true. It should not die, all of it. Zeus would have said that. You were in error, woman, goddess of goddesses. You were in error. You're trying to say that my Trojans should die, all of them, every last one, and the babies too. Yes. So the women got twisted. In Trojan times, the women went from loving, caring housewives and mothers to, because Hera had got in a bad mood, and Hera literally flipped up there. And because Hera flipped, Zeus didn't flip. He was like, wife, you're getting out of control. She was like, those Trojans, I can't believe them. Whatever, she was getting mad. Maybe for good reason. Some of those Trojans were drunks, and they were drunken men who beat their wives because their wives didn't share information with them, and it was over months they got to where they'd beat them. And a Trojan man would never think of beating his wife. Understand that the Trojan men as a whole would never beat their wives, and certainly it never happened. It never happened. Understand, it really didn't. Understand, God was happy with the Trojan men and happy with Troy for a long time. He was happy with the women, and he was happy with the whole city. He called it the city of God. He visited it. The people in Troy were blessed by the gods. They had walls that were protecting him. No one could invade. Understand, the men drank alcohol and they behaved somewhat pretty good, and they didn't beat their wives, not ever. It didn't happen, especially because they had God, Zeus. They knew he was watching. They wouldn't think of it. Understand, when Hera went against Zeus up on Mount Olympus, that was causing men to look at their wives, and wives were now withholding information from their husbands and saying, don't share anymore with them, because the women were thinking the men are egotistical, and Hera hated ego. She tried to kill all ego wherever it was. Tell it, get back, you ego beast animal. She hated them, and ultimately they misbehaved. And when they were drunk, egotistical men had the ego. It's a spirit. They would certainly be tending to rebel and have fun and get rowdy and do all kinds of stupid stuff. Well, the Trojan men didn't do stupid stuff. They were not egotistical. They weren't big fat egos. They got drunk, but they didn't misbehave. So what happened? When Hera lost her temper up there, Zeus was trying to tell her to calm down, and she was pissed off at the men of Troy that were drinking and disrespecting the women. And some of them were, a few of them. And they were only disrespecting him as far as insulting him. It was an insult, an emotional insult, or maybe they called him names. That was all it was. And Hera saw that, but it was happening, and it was not right. It certainly was not appropriate. So she wasn't really wrong. She was actually saying that man can't be a drunk and insult his wife. It's an insult to me. And she told Zeus to make sure those men stop drinking and tell them they can't have alcohol anymore. What's he going to tell? I can't tell those men they can't drink. That alcohol is a part of their society, and they party all the time. There's no way that I would take alcohol away from them. And she's saying, take it away from them. They should not be allowed to drink. They are misbehaving and disrespecting their wives. Understand, this argument happened between Zeus and Hera, where she said, I want you to ban the alcohol so that Trojan men can't drink anymore, and neither can women. We should get rid of the alcohol. She hated alcohol, and she thought that men who drank it became bad, and they did sometimes, but not that bad. She got mad and told, you better get rid of the alcohol, and Zeus said, I will not do it. I will allow those men to get drunk, and some will be dumb, but they're not that dumb, and they don't hurt their wives that bad. Maybe they insult them, but ultimately that's because that's what Zeus was doing to Hera. The men of Troy would behave like Zeus. Zeus was insulting Hera, saying, "You're out of line, woman, and you better get back. And what are you doing?" So the men would reflect that. They would tell their wives, "Wife, get back. You're out of line. I'm Zeus. My God's making me behave like this and think the same thing he's thinking." And because Hera just got worse, she said, "Either the alcohol goes or I'll go." And Zeus said, "Well, you'll have to go." And that was the biggest insult of all. You're going to get rid of your wife. You'd rather have the alcohol and have the children be drunk and stupid, but you let me leave you? Well, you can leave me, wife. I don't care if you leave. In fact, I want you to leave. Could you get the hell out of here? And then she'd be more pissed, saying, "Now you insulted me." Like, because she threatened to leave. And Zeus would say, "Please do." And she would be like, "Oh, I can't believe you." That was insulting. And it really did bother her and hurt her feelings. Zeus completely said, "Why don't you get the hell out of here, and wife, and go, and you don't have to come back," because he was getting tired of it. And he didn't need her anymore. And she just, "Whoa, now you're really out of line, husband." And then it got to where the women in Troy were behaving just like her up there, as above, so below. And it's the whole reason why we're fighting today. Okay. I'm excited to share this information and get it out there because I know that when it does, it will be taken and ultimately used as whoever takes this information will have it. And I'm less concerned as to whether that I got this from a unique source, that it matters that I could copyright this information or not. And the fact that I can't really copyright this information, it makes it so I still want to share it rather than hold on to it and not share it for a year or two or three at a time, so that during the when I can get enough of this information assembled to maybe write a book, or that's 3 years down the road. So I have to withhold this information from you for 3 years. So why I get enough of it compiled to then take the time, long time, to then sort it all out and into some kind of understandable understanding. And that will be 3 or 4 years from now. So I'll withhold all this information for the next 3 or 4 years while the human race suffers because it doesn't have this information. I'm very excited to say it now, and I don't care who takes it. I don't care if you say it's your idea or you thought of it. Ultimately, I didn't think of this. I was told this. So I know who did think of it. God told me all this, and he thought of it. So God thought of all this. So it came from him. And he told me this is not my information. It is ultimately his. And I agree. And he said, you can share it. And he says, and they're going to take it as their own, and maybe they'll copyright a lot of what you're saying. Now, understand, I actually had this conversation with God too. He told me this. And I talked to him. Maybe he's called me crazy, but he seems to be able to communicate with me. And I love it. And I'm thankful. He says that he says it's not my information. So if they copyright it or they take these ideas and make them their own, that's perfectly okay. So it is perfectly okay. I don't mind, because this is not my information. And if I try to copyright it, God would say, why would I use you as anything? You're going to try to copyright it. But how long are you going to withhold it first from the world, and why it's collecting? That the world will suffer without the information. You need to share it. And who cares if you make no money? And who cares if you don't get to write a book? Because you need to share the information and get it out so they can do something. So this world can change. Really? Okay. The whole idea of how we are as a society right now, men and women the women are very unhappy and combative, and also they've been beaten to a submissive or passive aggressive stance, which is no longer standing really against anybody. It certainly is in disposition emotionally and spiritually, but now not combative anymore, at least not visually, or you can't see them being warlike or standing up and punching people. Understand the women have learned how to war in a very discreet, secretive, passive aggressive, lazy, slow way that looks like they're in cooperation, and also they don't even know any of this, which means that the women are not even aware of what they're doing while they're doing it. But they will say that I'm not right, and what I just said is not true. The reason why is because the women will know exactly what they're feeling and doing in their feelings, and they certainly will know exactly how they feel. So if I said the woman didn't know what she was doing, she would ultimately say, I know exactly how I feel and I'm feeling. Don't tell me I don't know what I'm feeling. I'd say, no, I meant you don't know what you're doing. She'd say, well, I know exactly what I'm feeling. So understand, if we could say the words, she would say, she would see the difference between doing and feeling. But a woman thinks she knows what she's doing when she knows what she's feeling. She'll say she certainly knows what she's doing. And I'll say, well, you might know just what you're feeling and not what you're doing, but you're feeling it. And so you know it too. So it feels like you know what you're doing when you're feeling it because you know it. It's actually because you feel it and you don't know it. So you're feeling it and you're not knowing it. See, so it's ultimately me just telling her that, like, I'm not making her stupid. She might feel that way, ultimately, like I insulted her, but I would tell her that I don't mean any insult, but I'm trying to just help you. And I want you to know that not only are you upset that there's no goddess, there's only one God. In fact, if there was only one goddess today and there was no God, it would be the same thing as men would be upset. So imagine if there was. Hang on, I'm sorry. I'm being told what I think that's what I'm supposed to talk about. I think I'm on the wrong track. He wants me to set me straight on track again here. Talk about the importance of the coupling and the cooperating information sharing. Those are two things. Information sharing information with other people, and this means women sharing information with their husband or girlfriend with boyfriend, brother with sister, however it is. That women share information with men and try to share as much as you can and offer as much as you can, because understand this. I want you to know something and how important this is to be aware of this. This is unique, unheard of insight. Because you don't share information that is just minor information that doesn't really matter and it's not a big deal. It's just information that you decide is not even really that important. You probably tell yourself that, and you're probably not even lying. It's probably not that important, or it's not pertinent to have to share. I want you to know, if you ever find yourself saying that to yourself, that I don't think I should be sharing this, or I don't have to share it, well, then you should share it. I promise you, because you're trying to talk yourself out of it already. Understand that sharing information is so vital and important to the human spirit that exists in us, that's alive, the entity that is existing in us that's alive. And there's more than one. There's many of them. There's masculine entities, there's feminine entity, there's egotistical entity. There's also a version of woman's ego, which is not men's ego. So it comes from the feminine instead of the masculine. It's not even seen because it's not prevalent. Its behavior doesn't come out so obvious. But understand that withholding information that is even minor stuff will not only ruin your life, but it'll ruin your relationship every time, and always make your spouse or boyfriend or girlfriend or husband or wife or kids or brothers or sisters, uncles, aunts, or anything else. It'll always make them not only upset and not understanding what they're upset about, because they'll get upset you didn't share it. And it doesn't even matter if it was important, because it may be that you just decided it wasn't important and that's why you didn't share it. And you were right, that they'll feel exactly what you just did, and their spirit can feel it. So you need to be aware that men and women can feel what they're doing against each other in secret, and they also don't have a way to understand it if they can't see it and catch each other doing it. Everything you're doing behind your husband's back, don't think he doesn't feel every bit of it. He'll probably dismiss it on it's his fault, or he's psycho, or he's now blaming his wife, and he'll apologize to her. So you'll make your husband, you'll punish, well, it'll be bad. You'll be in trouble. Ultimately, you'll be in trouble genetically, because if you actually make your husband hate himself or doubt himself or discount his own thoughts because they're all about what you're doing, withholding information, well, it's not really your fault, is it? Well, it depends. What's the information? And if the husband is doing that to his wife, withholding information from her and not telling her where he's going, so with men, it's more like not telling them where they're going. Or telling them they went somewhere where they didn't go, or even where'd you go, and it was a place that they didn't go. Well, that will make a woman mad. If a man thinks he could just tell his wife that he went somewhere where he didn't go, she'll feel that he's a liar, and but she will actually not call him a liar. She'll at first go, where were you? I was at Safeway. Oh, but you were really at Albertsons. Well, she'll say, you lied. I don't know, but that's not till later. At first, she'll say, oh, you went to Safeway? You sure it wasn't Albertsons? No, I didn't go to Albertsons. I went to Safeway. But ultimately, if you went to Albertsons, though, she wouldn't say that. She wouldn't even know that. But ultimately, I'm telling you, you went to Albertsons, and then you went and told your wife you went to Safeway. She would catch that somewhere in her feelings, and it'd be minor at first. But if this kind of happened every day, this kind of occurrence where it's inconsistent, the information you're giving her when she asks questions, well, it'll certainly make her not only suspicious of you, but she will think you're a liar. Her spirit will also distrust you and think you're lying. And in fact, she'll be sure of it. And ultimately, you'll say, I'm not a liar. It doesn't even matter if I went to Safeway or if it was actually Albertsons. Are you kidding me? No, I'm not kidding you. And it does matter because you lied to her when you said Safeway and you actually went to Albertsons. And she felt it. She didn't know what it was. It probably frustrated her. She might have blamed you or even herself. So people, because they have a chance to blame each other, they will actually choose to either blame each other or themselves. And so understand that if you're in some conflict if you're the divine masculine or divine feminine and you're in conflict with the opposite side, it will be a huge problem. And it will ruin your relationships. Withholding information will be a deadly way to start World War III. Who knows? Yeah, because understand that people in their spirit, how they feel in their heart, their feelings and their reaction emotionally is going to be most offended and absolutely react in the worst way based on something that they feel is important that was not shared with them. And they will actually respond and emotionally react appropriately, meaning that because you didn't share something minor with them, and especially if it was important, it could have been worse, they will absolutely react and blame them. Maybe it's a person that says, I just had a huge angry feeling about what? I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't even know how to get mad at my wife. She just lied to me and I don't even know it. Well, then, yeah, you don't even know it's her. You think it's you. Maybe you'll say you're wrong. Or what are you doing? You'll look in the mirror and say, I'm psycho. I'm getting mad. I got something wrong with me, man. I'm freaking crazy going mad for no reason. Oh, there's a reason why you do it. If you're mad, don't tell me there's no reason. Do you understand that you will never, or if you will, realize that everything that happens to you emotionally has a reason, and there is no such thing as you reacting in any way at any time, and I say every time that you have an emotional reaction that's quite significant of any kind has an exact reason, and an absolute exact reason. So then what in the hell is wrong with me if I'm going emotional and having these, just going mad, be pissed off at people for nothing, and I'm just, blaming my wife for nothing, mad at my husband for no reason? Well, understand, how can you ever say that if you knew anything, that there's no reason why you're mad? That is a ridiculous statement. There's no reason why you're mad? Well, if you're mad, there's an exact reason that made you mad. That's why you are mad. Now you know it. So why are you saying there's no reason? Oh, because you don't know the reason? Oh, you don't know the reason. That's why you're frustrated even more, too, because you're mad and you don't know the reason. That's pretty much like, wow, I'm confused. I don't know the reason I'm mad. The reason is, okay, that's it. I guess that's about it. I can't think of anything else. If you keep not in conflict and not in disposition, share information, and also get with people in cooperation, and it has to be genuine, like you're trying to do a coupling, like connecting. And it could be good and bad, and that's a different story. I'm not going to get into talking about how connecting people is important and it's good, and it's also a reason that causes everything bad. Because when you're connected and it's not good, then it's bad. But if you're not connected, it's even worse because it can't be good. If you are connected and it's good, if it stays good, it doesn't go bad. And so that is good. If it does go bad, wow, then you got to disconnect. Anyways, that's about it. I'm on you're going to say hiatus, and am living free. And I just told you whatever I was told to say, and I didn't even choose the words, but interesting. Okay. I'll see y'all later. I don't even know what a hiatus